a very few number of people in our island community throughout history can be identified by just the name, Uncle Carl. Many people throughout history. Ricky Bordallo is one of those people, and the book that now bears his name has been published by UOG Press, and I have Lola and Guerrero and via the Fant from UOG Press here to talk about this wonderful tome of knowledge, Lola, and I would say a exploration of a truly remarkable Guamanian's life.
Absolutely. Ricky, A Life Worth Sharing, actually was a book that he began writing with Kathy Sablan Galt in 1987. So this is about 30 years in the making. So she interviewed him and he told her all these different aspects of his life. And at the end of it, there are 101 cassette tapes of these interviews that she transcribed into chapters and edited with him. And they worked on it, like I said, during his trial. So a lot of it is like, him really looking back and contemplating all these different aspects of his life and, how things sort of came to be at the point where he was at. And so, for us, it's just been such an incredible process of sort of piecing this puzzle together. For many years the book sat in different formats, and so we really began embarking on this at the very end of 2020, and so it involved converting floppy disks and digitizing digitizing cassette tapes and re-listening to portions that may not have been some of the chapters that were in the floppy disks were lost, and so having to recreate those chapters. I mean, really, Auntie Kathy did all that hard work.
And certainly a labor of love, because given the gravity of who he was to our people and in our community, like a former governor. And as I said, you say like the name Ricky, and anybody on Guam that's 40 years or over immediately knows who you're talking about.
Absolutely. And I think, his life alone just spans so much Guam history. And so to have this first person historical account is really incredible. I mean, his father went with FB Leon Guerrero to Washington, D.C., to appeal for U.S. citizenship and met with, President FDR. Then the war happens. Ricky's a teenager during the war, so he's old enough. And when they were writing this, his memory was still very vivid. So you get such incredible descriptions of pre-war and World War II Guam from the eyes of a teenager in a family that had already been sort of established as a business. His father was a business and a political leader. So, what their family experienced because of that is pretty horrendous. And to kind of see that through the eyes of a teenager. And then to like the war ending and he's 17 and he decides, I'm going to go off on my own and just sort of explore and see what's happening. You get this real insider look at sort of the way Guam changed so drastically in those post-war years. And then the book kind of ends with his very brief stint in the military. And then we decided to break the entire book up into 2 volumes. So volume 1, as I just mentioned, spans his childhood through, his brief time in the military. And then volume 2 will be hopefully released in a year. Covers his life as a business leader, politician, and then also his trial. So there had been so much that there was just no way it could all fit in one book.
Yeah, and via who Ricky was throughout history, because I remember when I was growing up, I was a freshman in high school when he passed. I found so remarkable when you guys put out the press releases. He said, like this book is a posthumous autobiography. And one of my coworkers was telling me, and she was like, so is it kind of like the Diary of Anne Frank, where it's the memoirs, the memories, the work that had gone into chronicling this amazing life, now assembled and like really put into storytelling.
Yeah. So how it was shared to me is that Auntie Kathy and Ricky would get together weekly to have these long conversations, these interviews that were recorded, and then she would transcribe them and they would go over the transcriptions together. And so really, she poured so much love and labor into the story, but it really is from his words. And when you read it, from what I've heard of him and how he articulates himself, he's such a brilliant storyteller. And the way that he talks is represented in the way that this book is written. So I think it's very accurate in the way he would portray his story.
Even though I was just a kid, as I said, I was like 14 when his life ended. But I remember seeing him around when my parents would we'd go to Gibson's to go get, like, I'm dating myself now, but going to like grocery shopping or stuff like that, or go get clothes. And if you would see him, he was a gentleman and a statesman. And let's talk about this wonderful art that adorns the cover, because when he wore a suit, if he was interacting with our federal counterparts, or he was giving a speech locally, the fashion he had, like the island wear that he had, was very, Lola, distinctly Ricky.
Yeah, he was notorious or famous for his white pants and very bright island print long sleeve button down shirts.
He had some amazing island print shirts.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that captured in here, like his manner of dress and like how how regal he was in his presentation?
It will be more in volume 2.
Okay.
So I think what you're going to see in volume 1 is it's all the black and white photography. It's not a photo heavy book because it very much is a novel. It's very much a story, but there are incredible black and white photos that we were able to kind of uncover and work together with his family to find at least the photos he references. But in volume 2, you're going to see a lot more of his fashion. He and his wife would participate in different Mardi Gras contests, and so there's a lot of really cool photos of them all dressed up in costume. And
did you ladies know that Madeline Bordallo was one of the first receptionists at KUAM when we first launched? She was, yeah.
And they do have really great photos of like her at KUAM.
And she brings it up all the time, every time I see her.
And she will actually be on island for the book launch, so that'll be really great.
That is amazing.
It was incredible, I think, working with her and their family to really, like I said, piece together all of the different parts. Not just Congresswoman Bordallo and their daughter Debbie, but also the Bordallo like first cousins. Like, for example, there's an image of his father when he had gone to DC that he had signed, and it was a very special and important photo that had been framed and always in his office. And so we worked with their family to find that and photograph that and include that. So I really think that it's very much a labor of love. A community came together to bring this story to life. And
we are going to catch up with Auntie Kathy because she did such amazing work like in this chronicle. But I now appreciate the fact that you're separating this, Lola, into 2 volumes, because he did have the controversial side to himself. And as you said, he went through the trials. The manner of his passing was very, very shocking at the time. And tonally, I would assume that the second book is really going to try and capture that.
Absolutely.
The impacts, what it did for our community.
Yeah, and he talks a bit about it in his preface to this book. And I think even as he's sharing these important parts of his young life, he's also contemplating from that place as an older person going through this trial and sort of on his own examining what is it about my life that's kind of brought me to this point, right? And in that contemplation, I think you really get this really beautiful portrait, not just of a person, right? Like he was saying, I think the title itself, A Life Worth Sharing, comes from a quote in the preface where he's like, he looks back and he feels that, that there may really be a life worth sharing here, that the things that I've been through are bigger than me, right? And I feel that it's important to share.
And to open yourself and be that vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that self-aware is incredible.
And I think there's honesty in some parts of that. He really, especially when we look at volume 2, you get that real insider experience of what it had been like to run in the first gubernatorial election and lose, right? And then win in the second one, to be the founder of the Democratic Party of Guam, but then not selected as the first speaker, right? So there's so many interesting, I think he actually described it in his preface as triumphs and hazards. Which is that's an interesting way to evaluate
all
your
these little
life.
signposts that were bittersweet. Right?
Yeah, and I think that readers what they may want to, or what they could expect from volume one, for me, is some of the best storytelling, like I said, of those pre-World War II, and immediate post-war years. It's some of the most vivid descriptions of Hagåtña and the vibrance of Hagåtña as a city. And that was something really important to him, is that Hagåtña had really been a city. There were people living there, people walking the streets, and it had been so alive, and he felt that it was a very deliberate attempt to kind of stifle our people by not rebuilding it into a city post-war. And so he kind of explores that, which is an interesting thing to think about.
You kind of even see his future vision like way back then.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, amazing. And you know, ironically, not ironically, but maybe fortuitously, some of those visions are finally starting to come to fruition with the Hagåtña redevelopment. And and I've heard some people over the years, as I said, Governor Bordallo had a dream about what this could be, and in concert with other featured leaders, they really worked it.
I think you pointed out that he is a controversial figure in history. He had a very tragic death that I think, as a community, especially a community with very high suicide rates, that we want to think about and talk about, right? So I don't think in any way, this is meant to glorify that per se, but rather, the manner in which someone dies, or even the manner in which they live, does not make their experience invalid, right? And so you're right, he's such a recognizable name and figure in our history. And from this life alone, we learn about these bigger moments. Like I said, this quest for U.S. citizenship, the beginnings of Guam's, the government of Guam having local autonomy, right? Imagine we only began electing our governors in 1970. So to see what that was like is incredibly important.
Let me ask Via real quick, because let's talk about, the cover image again, and just like the binding, and, even the illustration that you have to take off for the cover to see. I mean, the words carry so much impact, or they make so much impact, but the illustrations really bring it home too.
Yes, so it's a beautiful cover. I think I would even say my favorite cover from the press. It was illustrated by Gerald Castro, who's an art professor here at UOG, but he's a very talented artist.
Thank you, Gerald.
Yes, thank you, Gerald. And it was also designed by Ralph York Pataxil, another very talented artist in Guam. But there was a lot of careful thought put into this cover, not just to have this aesthetic look, but also to really portray who Ricky was as a man. And so, I'd really like to hand it over to Lola, because she was really part of the design process, so she'd be able to give you a little more insider knowledge. But yeah, it's a beautiful
Lola,
cover.
this is amazing, just this image, because you see Ricky depicted looking out, and he had those big signature glasses that like everybody could see from if you were in the back of the room when he was giving a speech, and he seems to be gazing out, contemplating something, and yet he's got the Antiguo values, and there's this young person in the old way of Guam and everything like that, literally within his consciousness.
Yeah, I think you pointed out...
That's a very powerful image.
Yeah, thank you. I think that what you pointed out are really critical pieces of what he shares. So the glasses, for his entire childhood, all the way until after the war, he didn't realize that he wasn't seeing in full vision. He is very, very, he really has a hard time. He didn't know he needed glasses.
I did not know that.
Until he got them and realized, this whole time I've been seeing life in blurs, and now I can see leaves on trees, right? So I think you noticing the glasses is important, because that became a critical moment for him when he realized that he needed them. The idea of him walking on the beach, right? So the double exposure of the photograph with the water, the beautiful watercolor that Gerald had done, is that he actually says in his preface, "I took a hard look at my life, trying to relate my past, present, and future, to contemplate the footprints and find the bird." And so the idea is that in the trial against him, the U.S. attorney had said, if you look at the footprints, you will find the bird, right? And it was used in a different context, which was, there's evidence, and he's trying to use this against Ricky. But he flips that to say, well, I am looking back, and and so this endeavor of telling his story is him tracing his own footsteps and telling his side, telling what the bird looks like in his eyes, if that makes any sense. And so what you see in the watercolor is him walking as a young person, and you see his footprints and the footprints of a bird. And it's on the side of the island where his family has beachfront property in agate. So you see, the silhouette of Fua, the creation rock in the distance, which is also a metaphor.
Was Governor Bordallo originally from Jonya?
No, he wasn't. His family, when he was a young person, they lived in Hagåtña, like most people in Guahan.
But the family's property was down in agate.
And they also had property down in agate.
Okay.
That's kind of like their ranch, and it's very important to him, and it features prominently in the book. But yeah, the inclusion of Fua shows the importance of culture and origin to him. And then, the seriousness of his posture and his face shows the seriousness of this endeavor, this contemplative mood that the story has.
Absolutely. Okay, so like I said, we are going to catch up with the author of this amazing work, Auntie Kathy Galt. We're going to get that next week. She's under the weather, so Auntie Kathy, blessings to you. We recover. Rest up and recover soon, because we'll have a really wonderful conversation. I would love to talk to her about the process, about the creativity, about the materials she was given. What an amazing responsibility that was. But Via, where can people pick up a copy of this? For their classroom to send to friends and family in the States?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find this book online at uogpress.com. It will be made available at all local bookstores following the launch. And it's also available in different formats on nyupress.com under our UOG Press partner page. And so you'd be able to get it in ebook format, paperback. So we're very excited to offer that.
So I can load it on my Kindle?
Yes, you can.
Absolutely. I got a Kindle for Christmas, actually.
Oh,
so
nice.
I'm loading up. This is going to be one of them, yeah.
Yeah, so you'll be able to find it in those locations and also at the book's launch. Right now, it's just available for pre-order. And if I could also share, I think this book attracts a lot of, we anticipate it'll attract those who were alive during Ricky's time and maybe who have heard of his death. But I think it's also a pivotal text for our younger generation. If I could share my experience in high school, all I really knew about Ricky Bordallo is that his house, the Bordallo mansion in Jonya, was haunted.
Yep.
And so it was just really like this game of telephone. We didn't know too much about who this man was or the story behind the haunting. And, the truth got warped into this rumor for entertainment. And fast forward 10 years later, I'm learning about his life and how articulate he was, all these things he did for Guam and his people that I look back and I think what a disservice to not know about him in school. And so I think this would be a very valuable text, especially in history classes. And what a privilege to know his life from his perspective.
And there is a very justified and valid reason, ladies and gentlemen, why the governor's complex down in Adelup bears his name.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so his contributions to our island community and the life he led, chronicled in this wonderful book, Ricky, A Life Worth Sharing, Volume 1, coming up very, very soon. So Lola and Via, thank you so much for sharing this, and I'm really, really excited to interview Auntie Kathy.
Thank you too. So yeah, please join us at the book's launch on...
It'll be on Monday, January 27th, starting at 5:30. We'll have guest speakers, we'll have little exhibits. People will be able to listen to some of the tapes that were recorded with Auntie Kathy, and it'll be just a beautiful celebration.
Yeah, and it's at the Government House in Hagåtña Heights.
All right, so putting a book together is not an easy endeavor, and you guys continue to add this to a very, very growing and amazing collection of incredible literature. So thank you both.
Thank you too.